part of being a head coach is having input in free agency and the draft, which is different in the NFL, where in the offseason, head coaches just self scout what they're doing on the field from an X's and O's standpoint. As we look at the BC Lions specifically in free agency, what do you think they need to get over the hump?
They need a running game. They have a good enough offense. They have a good enough quarterback with great weapons at the receiver positions, a defense that is productive with Ryan Phillips at the helm, but they need a running game. And if I'm anybody in the front office over there right now in BC, I'm making a call back to James Butler. Hey, do you remember us? Do you want to come back? But there are options in free agency right now. We talked about the top 30 last week. AJ Ouellette is still there for whatever reason, but there are some good running backs out there, and that's what they need to do in this offseason for them.
No question. I think when you look at the team that they're competing with on paper, we'll see what happens in free agency for top spot in the West for the last couple of years. And I expect that to be the case this upcoming year in the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. To me, it'll be interesting to see what they do in terms of their depth at quarterback behind Zach Claros. Zach has been nicked up a little bit. They have developed quarterbacks so well that now the rest of the league has come and started to calling. Does Chris Streveler come back into the CFL? If so, is that as a starter? If not, would he be a backup and potentially a short package guy to take some of the physical hits away from Zach? So what they do with that quarterback room is interesting because when Zach got there, it was a pretty full room. Ooh, I'm interested to see what they do with it throughout. Let's go a little bit further down in standings. The Calgary Stampeders were the standard bearer in terms of being that upper echelon team. They've fallen back to the pack a little bit. What does Calgary need to do this offseason? What's the biggest need?
Listen, when I look at the Calgary Stampeders and I think about the years of success that they've had over the years, they did it not just by the great talent that they had on the field, but by great schemes, by their ability to just move people. And I'm looking at the offense. I'm looking at the offensive line. I would love to see the offense run through the offensive line, whether it's through the running game with Kadeem Carey or Mr. Mayer, just having a little bit more time to process his reads. They have some playmakers as well on the at the receiver position, but if I were to focus on the Calgary Stampeders, I would look at the offensive line and sturdy that position up a little bit more.
Go to Saskatchewan. Your former defensive coordinator, now head coach Corey Mason. I mean, first things first, he needs to fill out a staff. So I understand that you keep his text message just unread. You're not responding to those requests. But I think it's not even a position, it's a personality trait. They need some dogs. Talk about dog of the week. They're a team that had the talent based off some of the teams they upset, but also at times for long stretches they seemed disinterested. And we kind of said we believe they could make a push for the playoffs. That never really happened. They need some Corey Masons, quite frankly, some dogs, some leaders. And I think more than anything, I think he needs to change the culture of that locker room. In Edmonton, we saw a change in culture when they had a change in quarterback. And so there was a much different team after it was the Trey area in Edmonton. What do you expect to see in free agency from the Elks?
Man, in Edmonton, I would say the same thing. I say a little bit more competition at the various positions, specifically dealing with the production at the receiver position. They're going to have a lot of production just to keep Trey a little bit more focused on what he's doing other than just, running the ball. We know what he can do. We absolutely know, and he is going to be the focal part of that offense. But we need to see different playmakers, whether it's in the backfield or the receiver position. Geno Lewis is a guy that can do that, but they got to utilize him even more and find another guy that can do exactly just that.
We'll stay at the bottom of the standings, but switch from west to east. When I look at the Ottawa REDBLACKS, they need a QB. Since Henry Burris and Trevor Harris left, they have tried and tried and tried. They have not fixed the QB position. They had two at the same time, and both, could end up being Hall of Famers. Now they have none. They have to throw as much resources and as many lottery balls at the position as possible. Obviously, Jeremiah Masoli will be trying to once again come back from injury. We saw what we liked at times from Crum, but it wasn't consistent. Some of the high-named backups, like a Drew Brown, should be in the mix. For me, it needs to be a QB competition coming out of camp with 3, 4, maybe even 5 viable options. That's a position they need to figure out how they're going to get right if they want to stay pace with the other teams in the East. When we look at your team, the team that you were with, the Toronto Argonauts, what do you see as the potential needs for the Argos in a free agency?
Listen, it's tough. It's tough. After a 16-2 season, it's really hard to nitpick on, hey, look, you need to improve here, there, and all and whatsoever. But the biggest thing and the reality of the situation is in Toronto is that there's a lot of free agents. We looked at the top 30 last week. We saw a lot of Toronto Argonauts on that list. And so the focus is really going to be on the front office to try and retain and keep as many guys on that list as possible and continue on that run so that they can also find themselves again in the Grey Cup like we did last year in 2022. So it'll be interesting to see, obviously, with the changes that are happening in the coaching staff with Corey Mace's departure. But you still want to try and keep as many guys in the locker room as possible. It's hard to nitpick one particular position, but at this point is who can we keep in the locker room?
No question. When you look at Montreal, how do you nitpick a team that was the hottest to end the season and won their Grey Cup? To me, I think their free agency was done early by keeping some of their veterans. But when you keep veterans, it gets expensive. I actually think for them, the best offseason is prioritizing the draft, getting as many draft picks as possible. When you look at them winning, yeah, those veterans were big, but on both sides of the ball, key plays made by Canadians who they prioritized, selected, identified, and developed via the draft. I think if they want to have sustained success, it's going to be by developing Canadians because, let's be honest, it's cheap labor. You get someone who can play at a high level early on a rookie deal, specifically as a Canadian. That is a great balancer in the market when you have to sometimes overpay free agents to come to your city. And last but not least, the Hamilton Tiger Cats, who slowly but surely went from back-to-back Grey Cup appearances, being minutes, yards away from winning a Grey Cup at home, to now having changes at the quarterback position, changes in the front office, changes on the coaching staff. There are going to be some changes in free agency. What do you expect them to be?
I think there's a lot of changes that are going to happen in Hamilton. They need a facelift. That's the reality. New coaching staff, at least a new head coach. And Coach Milanovic is a guy that's been around and he knows what he wants and he knows what he likes. This is a guy that's been around and is very, very opinionated. Let's put it like that. But he's in the locker room that now, having been on the team for, the second half of the season with the Hamilton Tiger Cats, he knows who's in the locker room. He knows already by now who he wants to keep and who his main guys are going to be. What they need to do and what I anticipate Coach Milanovic doing is really developing an identity for that offense. Now, look, let's define exactly who we're going to be on offense, but also who is going to be my quarterback. Because let's be honest, Coach Milanovic was in that meeting room probably when the decision was made for Bo Levi Mitchell not to play in their last game. And so he's going to have to make a big decision as far as who's going to be slinging the ball for him, but also what is the identity of this offense going to be like?